Let's begin as we always do with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Despite the evils which dominate the modern world, the continued celebration of Christmas in our societies, even in the crass ways that we're used to seeing now, shows that the modern world hasn't completely forgotten about the one who was born 2,000 years ago. In my opinion, Christmas retains its power to move and inspire because it reflects a universal human experience, the birth of a child. And that changes everything. When a child is born, a new ray of light breaks through the darkness of our superficial, distracted, materialistic world. A newborn child calls us back to deeper truths and higher purposes. In fact, you remember the birth of your first child? And an innocent little baby brings us face to face with the truth that's found at the very heart of the Bible, that God made us in His image. Even accounting for original sin, this divine image shines so brightly in an innocent little baby. And it's the clarity of this divine image that causes Satan to hate children with a particular ferocity. Today, Satan ferociously attacks children with this 3-point hellish plan. Number 1, there's abortion, which kills children in the womb. Number 2, there's this transgender ideology which mutilates children after birth. And number 3, there's corruption through depraved education, so-called education, murdering and mutilating the souls of children and adolescents. So if you look at abortion, in the U.S., the overturning of Roe v. Wade returned abortion to the states. And 2 years after this great pro-life victory, many states have banned abortion or imposed further restrictions on abortion. But abortionists have been fighting back. At the recent election, 7 states voted to expand access to abortion, with similar measures being defeated in 3 other states. The war against abortion is being fought in each state and will only be won by the truth and a massive education campaign. That's why our team at LifeSite News are committed to, number 1, educating the public with the truth about abortion and countering the lies of the abortion industry. We're providing in-depth coverage of state abortion battles with the mainstream media never covers. We're mobilizing support for pro-life measures nationwide. We've got our work cut out for us. But you see, abortion is just the beginning. Satan and his globalist pawns know that they can't have every baby killed in the womb. And if a baby does manage to avoid the horrible fate of being murdered before he or she sees the light of day, the devil has the next stage of his 3-point plan in store for them. In the Bible, God tells us that He made human beings as one of 2 sexes. The book of Genesis says, and I quote, "Male and female He created them," end quote. Just as Satan hates the image of God in souls of children, so too he hates their masculinity and femininity. That's why he's long been mobilizing his servants in the political, media, and financial worlds, and they are many, many of his servants in those worlds, to mutilate the bodies of children and obscure God's work in them. I have rarely been more distressed than by reading the story of Texas father Jeffrey Younger. LifeSite had the privilege of interviewing him years ago when he was going into this battle. Jeffrey just lost custody of his sons following a divorce, specifically because he opposed his wife's wish to have his son castrated and allegedly turned into a girl. Now that he's lost custody, there's nothing standing in the way of doctors chemically and surgically castrating 12-year-old James Younger, ensuring that James will be permanently mutilated and unable to father children for the rest of his life. These evil laws and the morally corrupt judiciary which enforces them are so wicked as to almost defy description. You can't even imagine that this is happening, but it is. That's why it's time to fight back for boys and girls like James Younger, who are defenseless against Satan's allies in the establishment. Our plan at LifeSite News to fight this is we're going to carry on fighting to free children from the medical and political establishment so eager to interfere with their bodies. We're going to carry on exposing the lies and distortions on which gender ideology is founded. And we're going to carry on and never stop sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ, our true hope. This kind, said Jesus, can go out by nothing but prayer and fasting, he said. So the alternative is too horrible. Like I said, we've got a lot on our plate here at LifeSite News. And then, just as he knows he can't kill all the babies, Satan also knows that he can't castrate, sterilize, neuter, and physically ruin every child that's been born. And so those who escape being aborted in the womb or having their bodies physically mutilated then become the targets of his spiritual and moral corruption. Satan hates to see innocence and purity in children and young adults. And so do his globalist minions in the government, in the media, and in public education. Through his extensive control over all these branches of public life, Satan gets his tentacles around millions of children and adolescents, working to extinguish the life of grace in their souls and to twist and corrupt them into total moral depravity. Through schools, the devil teaches anti-Christian ideologies like liberalism and atheism to lead young people to reject God altogether. And by flooding the world with pornography and immodesty, he is succeeding in destroying innocence and making chastity basically impossible. You know, once upon a time, not even that long ago, there was a great bulwark holding back this flood of moral sewage into the world. But that bulwark, that block, that defense was what St. Paul called the pillar and bulwark of truth, the Roman Catholic Church and her divinely instituted hierarchy. But today, Satan has won many of our supposed shepherds to his dark service. And from defending children, life, innocence, and purity, they're working with Satan, even providing the moral cover for his agents of impurity. Dark forces in the Vatican are building new synodal church, as they themselves call it, by the way. This synodal church has been bestowing its anti-blessings on sexual immorality. From adultery in Amoris Laetitia to the unnatural sin of sodomy in Fiducia Supplicans, to the transmania in Cardinal Fernandez's dubia on the transgender godparents. And in light of all this, Cardinal Fernandez's book of erotic, really filthy poetry feels almost innocent by comparison. But it's not all innocent in reality. And it's just as appalling that a priest, bishop, cardinal, prefect of the alleged holy office is appointed having published such smut. This synodal church is working to eclipse the Catholic Church, which is the only force against which Satan can never ultimately prevail. To oppose these evils, LifeSite News is working to expose the schemes that corrupt children wherever we find them, to provide true education founded on Christian principles, and inspire young people with a healthy model for life, to share the fullness of the gospel without compromise. The protection of children has always been at the heart of our mission here at LifeSite News, and it always will be. LifeSite News was born out of the fight to protect children from abortion. And as you can see, this battle rages as fiercely as ever. That's why we have entered the battlefield against these other threats to our children. But the scale of evil that we face, like Satan's three-point plan of murder of unborn babies, followed by the transgenderization and castration of children who are born, followed by the corruption of those who aren't castrated, can seem, well, overwhelming. First of all, the odds are certainly against us. And that's why I need to call on your help today to support our urgent campaign with a financial gift. Please donate. Donate today if you can to defeat those who want our children dead or mutilated or in hell. Head over to give.lifesitenews.com today to donate to this fall campaign. And if you're in America, and you can see scrolling along the bottom of your screen, you can text your donation to LifeSite by texting to 50155 the word LifeSite, LIFESITE, to 50155, and give whatever you can today. A donation to LifeSite News contributes directly to achieving all of these goals and means that together we can build an unstoppable global movement for freedom. But there's more. Those who escape Satan's three-point plan for the destruction of children and go on to grow up are soon to be faced with efforts to get them to kill themselves. Doesn't this sound just insane? Someone from 100 years ago would think, come on, you guys are making it up. But unfortunately, it's true. It's happening right before our eyes. In my own country of Canada and many other places, through the spread of euthanasia, assisted suicide, and so-called medical assistance in dying, of course, this pro-suicide backup plan of Satan also has our children in its sights. In Canada, which I'm sorry to say is leading the world when it comes to assisted suicide, the pro-death advocacy organization, they call themselves Dying with Dignity Canada, they claim that 71% of Canadians support mature minors to be granted medical assistance in dying. People think that this MAID, as they call it, is all about the elderly or at least the terminally ill, but no. We know all too well that it's being offered in the place of more costly treatments for diseases like cancer. Take Sarah, for example. She's a beloved Canadian grandma. Okay, Sarah's not a real name, of course, but all this really happened just in 2022. She was sitting on a plastic chair in a hospital hallway, shivering in a surgical gown, waiting alone to go in for breast cancer surgery. After a while, she said a doctor came and sat with her. She was undergoing a mastectomy, which is a pretty frightening process all by itself. Even if it's just routine in many cases, it involves actually losing part of yourself. So as you can imagine, Sarah was glad to have the reassuring presence of a doctor with her, even if it was about going through those frightening consent forms. But after he did all that, he committed what I think is the ultimate betrayal of a doctor to his patient. He asked Sarah, "Did you know about medical assistance in dying?" That's right. Just before surgery, while Sarah was on her own without any loved ones around her, while she was cold and vulnerable in a hospital gown, awaiting surgery, this doctor was offering to help her kill herself instead. This wasn't the last time that these doctors of death offered Sarah medical assistance in dying. They brought it up 2 more times. This is a quote from Sarah herself, and I quote, "I felt like a problem that needed to be gotten rid of, instead of a patient in need of treatment," end quote. Welcome to Canada in the 2020s. But make no mistake, this wickedness is going to spread beyond Canada. We can look at all the debates in the United Kingdom after the radical Labour government gave parliamentary time for a proposed suicide legislation, and the death cult just won that vote. But this evil is already legal throughout the United States, in California, Maine, Washington, and many more. How long until it's in your state? How long until it's your own grandmother sitting there, scared, alone, cold, and vulnerable? Or your mother, for that matter. How long until it's you? Imagine being told, your life is painful, your care is expensive, difficult, and inconvenient, probably a burden on your family. you should probably consider ending your life and not being a burden, especially on your family. It would be good for you too. All this pain, you don't need to suffer it. Our relentless reporting of these horror stories at LifeSite News is a crucial means of stopping the spread of assisted suicide throughout the world. It's only by knowing the truth that defenders of life and the natural law can fight for the vulnerable people like Sarah, like your grandmother. But unless this winter campaign goes well, we're going to struggle to keep this costly work going. So please support LifeSite News today to help us stand with all those feeling pressured into assisted suicide. If you're in the USA, you can text to donate. The instructions are on the screen below. Just text LifeSite, that's LIFESITE, to the number 50155 and go from there. If you're not from the United States or would not like to donate by text, you can head over to give.lifesitenews.com and follow the instructions there. Will you support the mission of LifeSite News as we raise the alarm against the push to pressure us all to commit suicide? Now, you might think that you're strong enough to resist the pressure to commit suicide, but it might not be up to you. That's because it's not just legal assisted suicide that's the problem. Even palliative care is sometimes used as a code name for actual euthanasia. Involuntary medical assistance in dying, they say. Just the other day, on this very show, Sister Deirdre Byrne, known as Sister Dee Dee, told me about her friend, Sister Philip Marie Burley, who she says was a victim of stealth euthanasia under the cover of palliative care. Back in 2022, Sister Philip Marie was in a coma following surgery and on narcotics. Being a doctor, Sister Dee Dee asked questions. The hospice said it was helping her transition, which she says is the code word for "we're killing her." When Sister Philip Marie came out of the coma, she was of sound mind and wanted to live. But visitors like Sister Dee Dee were soon banned from the hospital. And then they turned off her oxygen. She couldn't drink anything by mouth. And this allegedly Catholic hospice, by the way, wouldn't even let the priest give her the last rites. That's until Sister Dee Dee insisted. After he visited her, he told Sister Dee Dee that Sister Philip Marie was still breathing, but that she had no IV fluids or feeding tube and was very over-sedated. Soon after this visit, Sister Philip Marie was dead. Sister Philip Marie had a priest visit for the last rites because Sister Dee Dee was there advocating for her and not taking no for an answer. And if you know anything about Sister Dee Dee, you can see the hospital really had no choice. But Sister Dee Dee isn't going to be there to advocate for everyone. She can't be as much as she'd love to. Who's going to advocate for our children and our grandchildren once we've gone? Friends, this is just plain evil, and it will only get worse if assisted suicide is legalized. LifeSite News is at the forefront of speaking the truth boldly about the evils of the Canadian, Dutch, and other stealth euthanasia systems, which are also in the United States. We are working tirelessly to report every abusive legislation, to advocate for true palliative care, to educate readers about the risks that they face. The devil never sleeps, nor do his minions, and that's why we are working night and day with a team based around the world to ensure that we get the truth out to the millions of people who read LifeSite News in 8 different languages. And like I said, we're also exposing the truth about abortion to the general public and providing in-depth coverage of abortion battles that the mainstream media will just not give you. We are fighting tirelessly to keep children safe from the scalpels, surgical knives, and artificial hormones which the media medical and educational establishments are brandishing in their faces. And we're sharing the fullness of the gospel and education in accordance with the moral law. And we are exposing the synodal church by laying the axe at the roots and asking the questions which so few will allow themselves to even think about. The situation is very simple. The world needs truthful media organizations like LifeSite News to get out the truth and the evidence. If the truth gets out to enough people, we win. If people remain asleep, we lose. It's as simple as that. But we can't do this alone. Every dollar you give amplifies the truth and protects the vulnerable like Sarah and Sister Philip Marie. That's why I've been forced to ask your help today to support our urgent winter campaign. Modest but essential donations in the order of $35, $50, $100, $150, or $500, they make up the bulk of LifeSite News funding. These critical gifts are essential for us to carry on telling the whole truth about the attacks on life, faith, family, and freedom. Larger donations of $1,000 or $2,500 or $5,000 or more will have a very significant impact and set us up in a strong position as we enter a period of global violent conflict. That's why I urge you to help LifeSite News continue this fight. Funds are urgently needed. Will you be part of our fight? My dear friends, the moments of new life and of death are precious, and we need to protect them, sanctify them, and help others see that they are sanctified too. Christ's enemies called for him to come down from the cross, but he stayed there in agony and humiliation out of love for us. When we are in agony or humiliated at being a burden, our duty is to stay on the cross with him out of love for him and for our brothers and sisters. The globalist death cult doesn't just want our babies. It wants our grandparents and parents. It wants you and me too. And it wants us to get down off our crosses and reject the power of sacrifice and of redemptive suffering. This is our moment to draw a line in the sand. With your support, we can protect the dignity of life for generations to come. I know the approach of Christmas brings increased financial commitments for many families, and so sacrifices made at this time of year are particularly appreciated. Sacrifices made for children and the vulnerable put me in mind of those made for the Christ child during that first Christmas season when Our Lady and St. Joseph sacrificed their comfort while in a stable, when the Magi took their long, difficult journey to adore our Lord, and when Herod made the holy innocents into the first martyrs to shed their blood for Jesus Christ. By making an Advent gift, you ensure that LifeSite News can keep the divine child and his beloved children center stage in the year to come. But let me tell you, the end of the wicked is never pretty to see. Herod the Great, the one who slaughtered the holy innocents, died from an excruciating and disgusting disease, and the worms started eating him before he died. He actually tried to commit suicide too, to end it all. You know, things don't change much, do they? History shows that powerful enemies often collapse at the height of their power. God then shows that he alone is the Lord and ruler of the universe. So we must do what we can and leave the rest to God. In the meantime, you can chip in today by giving generously to defend life and dignity. Please donate to LifeSite News today to make your contribution to that victory. Thank you. And for LifeSite News, this is John-Henry Westen. May God bless you.